This happened when I was about 18. I grew up in a small town in Ontario where there's honestly nothing to do, so me and a couple friends used to just drive around at night. It was usually me, my buddy Chris, and sometimes his cousin Matt. Chris mentioned this abandoned house near an old quarry road. His dad worked construction and said the place had been empty for years. We didn't really plan anything, just parked on the side of the road and walked in. The house was set back in the trees a bit. From the outside, it looked empty. Peeling paint, broken porch railing, weeds everywhere. The front door wasn't locked. Inside, it didn't smell horrible like most abandoned places, just dusty. There was still a couch in the living room and a table in the kitchen. Nothing smashed up, no graffiti. That part felt weird, but we brushed it off. Matt went upstairs. Chris and I stayed down, just looking around and joking quietly. A few minutes later, Chris nudged me and asked if I heard that. I hadn't, until we both went quiet. There was a sound coming from upstairs. Not footsteps exactly, more like someone shifting their weight. Then a slow creak, like someone standing up. Chris called up, "Matt?" No answer. Then Matt yelled back, "That's not me." Right after that, we heard something move down the hallway upstairs. Slow, careful, like whoever it was knew exactly where they were stepping. We didn't say anything after that. We just walked straight out the front door and didn't stop until we were back in the car. Matt came running out a few seconds later, breathing hard, saying he saw someone standing at the end of the hallway upstairs, just a silhouette. We never went back. Chris later found out from a co-worker that people had been squatting in that house on and off for years. I still think about how quiet whoever it was stayed while we were inside. This happened when I was 21. I grew up in a small town in southern Ontario, the kind of place where everyone knows which houses are empty and which ones aren't, even if they've never been inside them. There was this one house at the end of Cedar Line Road that people had been talking about for years. Supposedly, the owner passed away, and the family never sold it. It just sat there. Me, my friend Dan, and his younger brother Luke decided to check it out one night. It wasn't planned. We were just driving around, bored, killing time. Dan had a beat-up Civic, Luke had a flashlight from work, and I had my phone. That was it. The house was set way back from the road, with a long, cracked driveway and trees growing up through it. No lights anywhere. The windows looked dark, but not broken. The place didn't look abandoned in the dramatic way. No graffiti, no smashed glass, just quiet. The front door was unlocked. Inside, it smelled like dust and old wood. Not rot, not mold, just stale air. The furniture was still there. A couch, an armchair, a dining table with chairs pushed in. There were picture frames on the walls, but the photos were gone, like someone had taken them out. Luke said that creeped him out more than anything. We walked through the main floor slowly. No rushing, no joking, just listening. The floor creaked in the normal way old houses do. Nothing felt immediately wrong. Then Dan pointed at the kitchen. There were dirty dishes in the sink. Not ancient, not dusty, just used. A mug with dried coffee at the bottom, a plate with crumbs on it. Dan laughed and said someone probably came in to mess around. I didn't laugh. Luke went upstairs alone, which annoyed me because we hadn't talked about splitting up. Me and Dan stayed downstairs looking through the living room in a small office. Papers were stacked neatly on the desk. Bills, mail, all addressed to the same name, dated within the last year. That's when we heard something upstairs. Not footsteps, more like a shift of weight. Then a quiet cough. Dan looked at me and whispered, "That wasn't Luke." We waited for Luke to say something. He didn't. Dan called up the stairs, "You good?" Luke's voice came back immediately, tight and low. "There's someone else up here." Before we could say anything else, a door upstairs closed. Slowly, not slammed. We didn't run, we just left. Walked straight out the front door, down the driveway, and didn't speak until we were in the car. Luke said he saw someone standing in the doorway of a bedroom watching him without saying a word. The house still stands. I drive past it sometimes. I've never seen it listed for sale. This happened when I was around 19. I grew up in a small town where most people just hang out in parking lots or drive around at night because there's nothing else to do. One evening, it was me, my friend Alex, and his friend Jordan. I barely knew Jordan, but he had a car, so he came along. Alex mentioned this old yellow house near the train tracks that everyone said was abandoned. He said it had been empty for years and that people used to break in when we were younger. We figured we'd just check it out, take a look, and leave. We parked a little ways down the road so the car wouldn't be obvious. The house sat by itself, trees grown up around it, paint peeling badly. A couple windows were broken, but most were intact. The place didn't look destroyed, just forgotten. The front door was unlocked. Inside, it was quiet in a way that made you lower your voice without realizing it. The air smelled stale, like old carpet and dust. There was still furniture inside, a couch, a recliner, a small kitchen table. Nothing was overturned or vandalized. That part made it uncomfortable. Alex started looking through the living room, while Jordan wandered toward the back of the house. I stayed near the entrance, mostly just listening. Every little sound felt louder than it should have been. A few minutes passed, and then I heard a noise from down the hallway. It wasn't a footstep exactly, more like someone shifting their weight, maybe bumping into something. I assumed it was Jordan until I realized he was standing right behind me. Alex asked, "Did you hear that?" Before I could answer, a door somewhere in the house closed. Not slammed, just shut. We all froze. Alex called out, "Hello?" In that awkward way people do when they're already nervous. No response. Then we heard movement again, closer this time, slow, deliberate. Like whoever it was wasn't trying to hide, but also wasn't in a hurry. Jordan whispered that he thought someone else might be in the house. None of us argued. We walked out, not running, just calmly, quietly leaving like we didn't want to draw attention to ourselves. As soon as we stepped outside, I felt that rush of relief you get when you realize you've been holding your breath. When we got back to the car and drove off, none of us said anything for a while. Alex finally said he didn't think that house was abandoned at all. I never went back to check. This happened when I was about 18. Me and my friend Rahul used to cut through this wooded area behind our old high school to smoke and just hang out. Everyone knew there was an abandoned brick house back there, but most people avoided it because it was kind of hidden and easy to miss unless you knew where to look. One evening, it was just me and Rahul. It was already getting dark, but not fully night yet. We decided to walk up to the house because we'd never actually gone inside before. The place looked rough from the outside. Broken steps, vines crawling up the walls, windows covered in dirt but not smashed. What stood out was that the front door was shut properly, not hanging open, just closed. Rahul joked that maybe someone still owned it, but he tried the handle anyway. It opened. Inside, the house felt colder than outside. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. There was barely any furniture, but there were signs people had been there recently. Empty bottles, cigarette butts, a blanket folded on the floor in one room. We stayed near the entrance at first, just talking quietly and looking around. The silence felt heavy, like the house was swallowing sound. Every time one of us moved, the floor creaked way louder than it should have. We were standing there when we heard a sound upstairs. It wasn't footsteps. It sounded like someone dragging something across the floor. Slow, uneven. Rahul looked at me and whispered, "Did you hear that?" Before I could answer, the sound stopped. We waited. Nothing. Rahul said it was probably an animal, but he didn't sound convinced. He took one step toward the stairs and then froze. From upstairs, we heard a voice, low, male, and close enough that it echoed down the stairwell. "Hey!" That was it. Just, "Hey!" We didn't respond. We didn't run either. We just backed out of the house slowly, never turning our backs on the stairs. As soon as we were outside, we walked fast back toward the trees. About halfway back, we heard the front door of the house close. We didn't look back. We never went near that house again, and a few months later, it was completely boarded up. No signs, no explanation. I still don't know how long someone was in there before we walked in. This happened in Mumbai when I was around 20. Me and my friend Samir used to go on late-night walks because it was the only time the city felt quiet. Not empty, just quieter. One night, we ended up near an old mill area that had mostly shut down years ago. A lot of the buildings there were half-used or completely abandoned. There was one residential building that stood out. About 5 floors, no lights on, except one flickering tube light near the staircase. The ground floor shops were all locked and covered in dust. It didn't look officially abandoned, but nobody we knew lived there either. Samir said his cousin used to live nearby and that the building had been empty for a long time because of some ownership dispute. We didn't really plan to go inside. We were just standing outside talking when we noticed the main door wasn't locked. That alone felt weird for Mumbai. We stepped in. The smell hit first. Damp walls, old garbage. That sour concrete smell buildings get during monsoon. The staircase was narrow, and our footsteps echoed way louder than expected. There was no lift working. We stayed on the ground floor at first. There were old nameplates still on the doors, but the names were scratched out. One flat had its door slightly open, just enough to see inside. Completely empty, except for a plastic chair in the middle of the room. Samir joked that maybe a watchman lived here or something. I didn't reply because I could hear something above us. Footsteps, slow, uneven, like someone going down the stairs but stopping every few steps. We both looked up at the same time. The tube light on the first floor landing flickered harder, then stabilized. I could see a shadow on the wall, stretched and distorted by the light. I called out, "Hello?" without really thinking. The footsteps stopped. A few seconds passed, and then a man's voice came from above us, calm, almost annoyed. "Kaya chahiye? What do you want?" We didn't answer. Samir grabbed my arm and shook his head. We turned and walked out, trying not to make it obvious that we were scared. As soon as we stepped outside, we heard the building's main door close behind us. Not slam, just close. We didn't run, but we walked fast, blending back into the noise of the main road. Neither of us spoke until we were far away. Samir later told me his cousin said people sometimes squat in those buildings at night because no one checks them. I still don't know who that man was or how long he was standing there before we noticed him.